Joining us now is Emily Thornberry, the Shadow Attorney General for England and Wales. And Emily, thank you so much for making the time for us this afternoon. I want to ask you one very direct, specific question to start with. And that's, if you had a relative who was languishing on an NHS waiting list and they could be seen sooner, perhaps their life could be saved by going private, would you want them to do so?
I have.
Well, that's a very different response, isn't it, from Sir Keir Starmer last night, who seemed to say, well, he did say with full conviction that he absolutely would not support a relative to use private healthcare. Is that, in your view, ideology gone mad?
No, I think that the point is this. We have to have a government that is going to make sure that everybody is looked after properly. You know, when Labour left office, we had the highest rate of people being satisfied with the NHS that the NHS had ever had. And now, after 14 years of the Conservatives, we have the longest waiting lists that the NHS has ever had. Go figure. We've had a Prime Minister who told us that waiting lists were dropping. He lied. He told us that the number of people coming in on boats had gone down. He lied. He told us that Labour was going to increase taxes. He lied. Unfortunately, we have a Prime Minister who is a liar, and he demeans the role of office of Prime Minister. He has been abusing the civil service, and do you know what? We're furious. And we're furious on behalf of the British public, because the British people should be able to make decisions on facts. And people should put their hand on their heart and tell people the truth. And if you have a Prime Minister who is so desperate that he will basically just say anything to try to hang on to power, he will lash out at institutions upon which our very state is dependent, then frankly, he ought to go. And hopefully, in a month's time, he will have.
So, Emily, let's stick to facts then and ignore what the Tory spinners have been saying. Let's ignore their £2,000 figure. Let's just stick to the issue of frozen tax thresholds. You have said that freezing tax thresholds amounts to a huge tax rise for ordinary working people, and we've seen that over the last couple of years. And yet the Labour Party has still committed to those frozen thresholds up until 2027, 2028. Surely that means the Labour Party has committed itself to raising taxes on ordinary working people, but not just people in jobs, people who have retired as well, because for the first time, the state pension is set to be taxed as well due to those frozen tax thresholds.
Labour will not raise income tax. Labour will not raise national insurance. Labour will not raise VAT. Thresholds are something which always, historically, have needed to be considered at each time there is a budget, because it depends on the rate of inflation. And, you know, that is just a central truth.
But, Emily, you say that
I hear what you say
thresholds amounts to tax rises. You said, and it's true, ordinary working people have seen their taxes go up due to what's known as fiscal drag, those frozen tax thresholds. Now, you're saying on the one hand you won't raise taxes on ordinary working people, but on the other, you'll keep those frozen thresholds. Those two things can't live alongside one another.
I think I just answered that. So there are frozen thresholds that have been applied over the last few years. Each time there is a budget, the Chancellor has to look at the thresholds and decide, depending on the rate of inflation, etc., what is a fair thing to do. And that is what should happen.
Yeah, Emily...
But, you know, for the Tories to come into this general election saying that they're going to take one group, and only one group, and change the relationship in terms of thresholds to pensioners is just extraordinary and uncosted. They claim that they can pay for it, but, you know, you just look in some detail at their numbers. It makes absolutely no sense. Do you know what I would suggest? I would suggest that the Treasury have a look at their promises and has a look at what the numbers are that they're putting forward.
Emily, well, the Conservatives Conservatives have done.
Frankly, it doesn't take. It doesn't.
Emily, the Conservatives have done their calculations, and they've come up with this £2,094 tax rate, as they call it, that we can expect under Labour. Rachel Reeves, as you said, has said absolutely no rises on national insurance, income tax, and VAT. Those taxes on working people, but there are a lot of other taxes out there, aren't they, Emily Thornberry? There's capital gains, there's corporation tax, of course, taxes on pensions. You've got excise duties. You've got all sorts of different taxes. Is Rachel Reeves being a little bit deceptive there by putting a boundary around those working people taxes?
If you want to have any more details, and I'm sure that you will, what you will need to do is look at our manifesto, which will be fully costed. Every promise that we have made has been costed, one by one. As we've made an announcement, we've said this money will come from, and we've said. But I tell you what, when the Tories say that they're going to get rid of national insurance, right? They have no figures for how they're going to pay for that. How will that get paid? What are they going to do? When they say that they're going to introduce this dad's army for teenagers, they haven't said how they're going to pay for that. It doesn't make any sense. They say that they're going to have a triple lock plus in relation to pensioners. They can't tell us how much that's going to cost or where the money is going to come from. All I'm saying is that we have been really careful to every time we say that we're going to spend some money, we've said where the money is going to come from. So for the Conservatives to turn up at this stage and to make up lies about how much it is that we're going to increase taxes by, where it simply is not true, and they're using the civil service in order to try to shield themselves, it's completely disgraceful, and we are furious.
Independent economists, left-leaning economists, centrist economists, centre-right economists across the board say that if we're going to see improvement in public services, as the Labour Party is promising, there will need to be general tax rises. Now, I suspect that the Labour Party will do that through keeping those thresholds frozen, so that more people are dragged into higher tax brackets. As we've seen, these stealth tax rises will continue, whichever party is in power. And I suspect that the Labour Party will also potentially double capital gains tax as well. What's hard to imagine is that none of those major tax changes happen. I don't know where you're getting any of this from.
I don't know where you're getting any of this from. Where are you getting that we're going to double capital gains tax? Who said that?
It's widely expected.
I'm sorry, but you're not the Chancellor. You're not the Shadow Chancellor.
There's a market expectation there, Emily Thornberry.
How we're going to raise money. Well, tough. Listen, people should expect that we will do what we will say in our manifesto. And I can tell you this, that we have had to make some really difficult decisions in relation to that, because we do know that money is limited. And we do know that what we are likely to inherit, if we are given the honour of being the next government, will be an absolute mess. And so what we've said is, this is where we will spend money in the short term. This is what our first steps will be. And most important, and over above everything else, and pledge number one, is to make sure that we stabilise the economy, that we grow the economy, and only through growing that economy will we be able to do the sort of things that we, of course, want to do, because we are a Labour government and we would want to look after those who need a hand. And yes, of course, when we are able to grow the economy, as we did when we were last in power, and as this lot have not been able to do, we will be able to afford to put money into public services. When we left power, nobody complained about the NHS. It wasn't a political issue. It had the highest satisfaction ratings that it had ever had, and now it has the highest waiting list that it's ever had.
But Emily
this is what's going on.
The Labour Party seem to be expecting the British public to believe that clamping down on non-doms, taxing private schools, and being a little bit cracking down on tax avoidance is going to pay to transform the NHS, is going to pay for all your various spending pledges.
No. We have absolutely not said that.
That's how the pledges are paid for, as set out.
Yeah, but you need to look at what the pledges are, right? So what we have said, for example, on schools is 6,500 teachers, 6,500 new teachers, and that will be paid for by putting VAT on private schools, right? That's where we get the money from in relation to that. That is, of course, not a transformation of our education system. It will take much longer to be able to turn the tankard round. We have talked about the increase in the number of appointments that we will be able to get with doctors in order to start cutting back on the huge waiting list of more than 7 million that the Tories have built up. Of course, it will take time. but we know the direction that we're going to be going, and we have not said you just, close the tax loopholes on non-DOMs and that will transform, the health service. Of course we're not saying that, but this is grown-up politics. We are being responsible. We want people to trust us, and we want to be able to put forward what we will do and stick to our word. And the last thing we want is a bunch of liars being led by this Prime Minister who's prepared to make up anything because they're so desperate to keep in power and they have no idea what they want to do anyway, and are prepared to essentially just get away with anything. And I hope that the people on GB News will hold them to account, because it should be your duty to do so. Don't let them get away with this. Lying to the British public is not something which should be forgiven.
OK.
I hope we will hold all politicians to account in the same way that we do. But Emily Thornberry, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for giving us some lines to deliver to the next Tory we have on here.